A 23-year-old Instagram model from Texas travels to Dubai after receiving an exclusive offer from a luxury car brand. The trip promises exposure, wealth, and a brand new car. For a few days, everything seems perfect. Posts of ocean views, high-end dinners, and designer gifts flood her feed. Then, without warning, all activity stops. Her family can't reach her. Her boyfriend's calls go unanswered. And 1 week later, only half of her body is discovered washed up on a Dubai beach. Authorities claim it was an accident, but those who knew her insist something far darker happened. What investigators uncover next exposes a world of power, deceit, and obsession, one that Aaliyah Carter never stood a chance against. Welcome back to True Crime Retold, where we uncover the stories that others stop telling, cases that test everything you think you know about human nature. If you find our deep dives as gripping as we do, please take a second to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new case. Now, let's get into it. On a bright Thursday morning in Dallas, 23-year-old Aaliyah Carter sat at her small vanity table, fixing her hair and scrolling through her phone. Her notifications were non-stop, brands tagging her, followers commenting, DMs from people wanting to collab. For Aaliyah, this wasn't just fun. It was work. She'd spent the last 3 years trying to grow her modeling career, posting daily, juggling small deals, and saving every cent she could. She lived with her boyfriend Jacob, a mechanic who had been by her side long before the brand names and photo shoots. He worked long hours, often coming home covered in oil, but he never complained about supporting her dream. When she got her first 10,000 followers, he bought a small cake that said, "Keep going." She did. One night, while checking messages, a new email caught her attention. The subject line read, "Brand Partnership Opportunity, Dubai Luxury Motors." The sender claimed to represent a car company expanding into influencer marketing. They wanted Aaliyah to come to Dubai for a sponsored campaign, and part of the deal included shooting with a brand new luxury car, hers to keep afterward. Weeks earlier, her friend Jasmine had convinced her to apply for an international campaign the brand was supposedly running. Aaliyah had sent in her details half-heartedly, not really expecting anything to come from it. So when this email arrived, official logo, professional tone, full itinerary, she was genuinely surprised. At first, she laughed. It sounded too good to be real. But the email included a proper signature, a phone number, even attached paperwork with an official letterhead. The message said their company worked closely with Sheikh Amir Al-Rahman, a respected businessman known for funding global charity events. His name alone carried weight online. Quick searches brought up photos of him standing beside celebrities and world leaders. Aaliyah replied politely, expecting nothing. Within hours, she got a call from a woman with a soft British accent who introduced herself as the Sheikh's brand coordinator. She explained the details: flights covered, a 5-star hotel, appearance fees, and the chance to work directly with Amir himself. Jacob didn't like it from the start. He thought it was too fast, too perfect. He told her to check everything twice. She did, and everything looked legitimate. The travel itinerary came from a verified agency, and the payment contract listed a legal Dubai address. After a few days of back and forth, Aaliyah signed. She told Jacob she'd only be gone for a week, and that this deal could change everything for them both. He forced a smile and said he was proud of her, but when she hugged him goodbye, he held her a little tighter than usual. Her flight was set for the following Monday. It would be her first trip outside the country. Aaliyah's flight to Dubai was supposed to change her life for 1 week. That's how long the brand deal was set to last: 7 days of photo shoots, 1 meet-and-greet event, and a short video campaign for a luxury car launch. She had her return ticket printed and framed neatly inside her passport. Everything felt temporary, like a brief step into another world before coming back home. But from the moment she arrived, nothing about the trip felt temporary. The first breath of warm desert air, The chauffeur waiting at the gate, the calm confidence of the people greeting her. It all felt permanent, as if she was meant to be there. Her driver handed her a cold bottle of water and smiled without speaking much English. The vehicle was a sleek black SUV that moved through Dubai's endless skyline like a whisper. Her hotel was a palace, the kind of place she used to scroll past online, wondering who actually stayed there. Now she was that person. The lobby shimmered under crystal chandeliers, and a scent of jasmine drifted through the air. At the front desk, the staff already knew her name. Her room overlooked the sea, floor-to-ceiling glass with sunlight spilling over a white couch. Waiting for her was a fruit basket, a card, and a small box containing a gold bracelet engraved with her initials. The card was simple. "Welcome to Dubai, Miss Carter. Your comfort is our priority." From that moment, she felt seen. Over the next few days, Aliyah moved through a schedule that felt effortless. The brand's photographers met her at designer showrooms, stylists brought racks of clothing straight to her room, and assistants carried equipment while she posed against golden backdrops and luxury cars. Everything ran perfectly. People treated her with quiet respect, as if she had always belonged in that world. It didn't take long for her social media to explode. The kind of engagement she used to fight for suddenly happened on its own. Her followers doubled, brands reposted her content, and new sponsors began reaching out. Each photo she shared from Dubai, each caption about grateful moments and dreams turning real, fed a growing story of success that her audience loved. Halfway through the week, she met the man behind it all. Sheikh Amir Al-Rahman. He arrived at one of the shoots unannounced. The photographers stopped working the instant they saw him. He wasn't loud or surrounded by an entourage, but people stepped aside without being told to. He was tall, well-dressed, with calm eyes and a voice that carried certainty. When he spoke to her, it was with warmth and sincerity. He told her he admired her work ethic, how far she'd come on her own. He said she reminded him of people who built their futures from nothing. Aliyah had met businessmen before, but none like him. There was no arrogance in his tone, no flirtation, just the kind of presence that made you want to listen. He talked about how Dubai was changing, how women like her could represent a new image of confidence and ambition. She left that meeting feeling inspired, as if she'd been personally chosen for something greater. From then on, her trip no longer felt like a short-term project. It started feeling like the beginning of a partnership. 2 days later, a message came from Amir's assistant saying the sheikh had extended her contract. The campaign was expanding. There would be additional shoots, travel around the city, and interviews for press coverage. Her stay was now open-ended, everything handled and paid for. She could stay as long as needed. It sounded like a dream. When she called home, her voice carried excitement she couldn't hide. Jacob was happy for her, though his tone stayed quiet. She promised she'd be home soon, that this extension was just too good to turn down. He didn't argue. He trusted her judgment, even if he didn't understand the world she was stepping into. The following weeks became a blur of luxury and praise. She attended fashion shows, private dinners, and charity events. The sheikh often appeared at these gatherings, greeting her like a mentor, checking in on someone he believed in. He made her feel protected, like part of a small, privileged circle. Soon, gifts started arriving in her room: perfume, handbags, limited edition jewelry. Each one came with a short message of appreciation, never forward, always respectful. It became a ritual she looked forward to every morning. She began posting them online, thanking the brands, tagging locations, building the image of a woman who was finally living the life she'd always imagined. Her social media transformed overnight. The numbers were staggering. People called her lucky, goals, the next big thing. She started to believe it herself. The girl from Atlanta who once modeled in borrowed clothes was now sitting in cars most people only saw in magazines. As the days stretched into weeks, she grew more comfortable in Dubai. Her schedule, once tight, now moved at her own pace. Assistants handled bookings, drivers waited downstairs whenever she wanted to leave, and the staff at her hotel greeted her with familiar smiles. The sheikh occasionally invited her to lunch or dinner, always framed as catching up about the campaign. These meetings felt natural, comfortable. He spoke about culture, travel, and the power of using influence for good. He listened when she spoke. He remembered details about her mother's cooking, her hometown, her favorite color. Slowly, admiration turned into affection. Aliyah didn't notice when the line between work and friendship blurred. She began to feel that she owed him something, not in a business sense, but emotionally. He had given her everything: exposure, respect, opportunity. Gratitude grew into something more. Her posts reflected that shift. The photos became softer, more personal, and her captions hinted at emotion rather than business. She started to smile differently, confidently, almost lovingly. Her followers noticed. So did the sheikh. The connection between them deepened quietly. When he sent gifts, she accepted them without hesitation. When he offered advice, she followed it. And when he told her she was too important to rush home, she agreed. She told herself she'd stay a little longer, just until the campaign officially launched. But weeks passed, and the campaign never launched. Instead, new opportunities kept appearing, each one tying her a little closer to him. By then, Aliyah had stopped counting days. Dubai had become her world. The bright hotel, the glowing skyline, the soft voice of the man who always seemed to know what she needed. It all felt safe, certain, and endless. There were no signs of danger, only comfort, only luxury, only the feeling that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the weeks went by, Aliyah's life in Dubai settled into a rhythm that almost didn't feel real. Days began late and ended even later. She woke to the sound of the sea outside her window, sunlight spilling over marble floors, and messages from her growing audience telling her how inspired they were by her success. The hotel staff greeted her each morning like she was royalty. Everything about her life now moved smoothly, as if someone had planned every second before she even opened her eyes. The sheikh's team managed everything. Drivers arrived before she asked, meals were delivered without being ordered, and her schedule flowed from one glamorous event to another. Photo shoots near the marina, fine dining under chandeliers, charity galas filled with people whose names she'd once only seen online. Every corner of her day seemed designed to make her look and feel important. When she posted, her phone lit up with thousands of likes and comments. She was becoming what she had always dreamed of, a face people recognized, a woman admired for her beauty and success. The numbers on her screen no longer looked like followers. They looked like validation. Each post brought her closer to the version of herself she had imagined for years. The sheikh often appeared at these events, always quietly, never demanding attention. When he walked into a room, conversations paused without anyone noticing why. He spoke to her in short, meaningful exchanges that left her feeling seen in ways no one else had managed. His words carried weight, the kind that stayed in her mind long after he left. Her relationship with him grew stronger without either of them having to define it. He had a way of making her feel like everything she was doing mattered, that she wasn't just a model or an influencer, but part of something bigger. When he praised her, it felt earned. When he complimented her, it felt sincere. She stopped counting the days since she left home. Her social media reflected that change. The captions became more reflective, the tone more confident. She began writing about finding peace, manifesting greatness, trusting timing. Her followers loved it. They saw a woman living her dream, completely transformed. Jacob, back home, watched the transformation from afar. He didn't understand this new version of her, the filtered perfection, the designer gifts, the endless dinners. Their calls became shorter, sometimes just a few minutes before she said she had to go. The distance between them stretched quietly, not with arguments or harsh words, but with silence. She told herself it was just temporary, that once the campaign was over, everything would return to normal. The Sheikh seemed pleased with her progress. He began involving her in more of his public appearances. Photographers captured them together, her smile bright beside his calm expression. Online, people speculated about their connection. Some called her lucky, others called her ambitious. She paid no attention to the gossip. She only saw how much her engagement grew whenever his name appeared beside hers. Sometimes he sent her notes written in neat handwriting, thanking her for representing his vision with grace and intelligence. Other times, gifts arrived without explanation. Fine jewelry, rare perfumes, handwritten poetry books. She accepted everything with quiet gratitude. It felt good to be appreciated, to be chosen, to be seen. The longer she stayed, the smaller her world became, though she didn't notice it happening. Her original contacts from the brand spoke to her less often. When she asked about the official campaign, they assured her that everything was progressing. Every delay came with an apology and a reason that sounded logical. It never occurred to her to question it. Days blended into one another, filled with beauty and stillness. Her phone stayed full of praise. Her face became the story of success. A girl from Texas living the life every influencer wanted. She started to believe that this new version of herself was permanent, that the life she had before was just a stepping stone to reach this one. Whenever she thought of going home, something always came up. A new opportunity, a small favor requested, a message reminding her how valued she was. The flight she once had booked no longer existed in her mind. Dubai had become the center of her world, and the man who made it all possible was at the heart of it. By her second month in Dubai, Aliyah's life had turned into a perfect loop. The mornings always started the same way. A knock at her door, a polite voice wishing her good day, a tray of breakfast arranged like a photo shoot, fresh fruit, coffee, warm pastries, sometimes flowers. Each day, a handwritten card arrived with the meal. Her schedule was no longer fixed to campaign events. The brand had gone quiet about deadlines and release dates. The new focus was presence. They said her image alone, her look, her elegance, her confidence, was now the brand. She wasn't just representing luxury anymore, she was living it. It sounded glamorous, and to Aliyah, it felt like success. She had everything she used to dream about. The clothes, the attention, the access. She moved through the city with drivers waiting outside, staff following discreetly, and doors opening before she even reached for them. Dubai had a rhythm that rewarded beauty and control, and she had learned how to move perfectly within it. Yet beneath all that shine, something subtle had started to change. It began with small things, the way her messages sometimes didn't go through, the times when her hotel calls were rerouted to a concierge who said they'd pass along the request. Her original contact from the car company stopped replying altogether, replaced by a new coordinator who spoke in polite, vague sentences and signed emails with only initials. When she asked about her flight home, she was told there were unforeseen adjustments to the travel plan and that the brand would handle everything. It sounded professional, so she let it go. Still, she started to miss home in ways she hadn't before. She missed noise, real noise. The sound of Jacob's tools in the garage, her mother's laughter over speakerphone, the scratch of her cousin's dog running through the house. Dubai was beautiful but sterile. Everything smelled of perfume and marble. There was no randomness, no clutter, no warmth. She thought about calling Jacob more often, but kept putting it off. Every time she looked at her phone, a message from the Sheikh's team seemed to arrive just before she could dial. A reminder of an event, a car waiting outside, a dinner invitation. It always felt like she had no time, and before she knew it, days had passed without a real conversation. When she finally called, the distance between them was clear. Jacob's voice sounded smaller through the line, buried under background noise from the shop. He asked when she was coming home. She said soon, but her answer lacked certainty. He paused, then said he'd stop asking. That hurt her more than she expected. That night she looked around her suite and felt a strange kind of quiet. Everything was perfect. The lighting, the temperature, the arrangement of the furniture. Yet something about the stillness pressed against her chest. She brushed it off. Success always came with pressure, she told herself. This was what growing looked like. The Sheikh's presence in her life grew naturally, almost invisibly. At first, he only appeared at events. Then came small visits, unannounced but never intrusive. He would check in on her progress, ask how she was adjusting, and remind her that she was part of the family now. The phrase stayed with her. Family. It sounded comforting but also heavy. Like a promise she hadn't agreed to, but didn't want to break. His attention was never inappropriate. It was calm, measured, thoughtful, the kind that made her feel respected and protected. When he entered a room, people lowered their voices. When he spoke to her, the world seemed to pause. He praised her success online, reposted her photos, and publicly called her a symbol of grace. The posts brought her even more followers. She was the face of elegance, the kind of woman people admired but didn't fully understand. But admiration came with expectation. He started to appear in her schedule more often. Her coordinator would message, "Lunch with His Excellency at 2 p.m., or private dinner for the ambassador's guests. Attendance required." It was never a request, but it always came with a smiley face or a polite tone that made it sound optional, even though it wasn't. When she tried to make plans of her own, someone from his staff would step in to assist. Her independence was quietly managed, wrapped in courtesy. Her world began to shrink without her realizing it. Still, Aliyah told herself this was how high-level work functioned: organized, precise, protected. She convinced herself that she was being cared for, not controlled. As the days stretched on, she began spending more evenings in his company. Sometimes at formal events, other times in quiet settings, dinners at his residence, meetings at private lounges. These moments blurred the lines between personal and professional, but the atmosphere was always respectful. He spoke about legacy, image, and faith. He told stories about building from nothing, about helping others rise. Aliyah admired that. She saw him as a mentor, someone who understood her drive and wanted to guide her. His approval felt like proof that she was doing something right. The more he trusted her, the more she trusted him. Her world outside of Dubai started to fade. Jacob stopped commenting on her posts. Friends back home texted less. When they did, the conversations felt shallow, out of sync. She had changed too much, or maybe they just couldn't relate anymore. Every photo she posted looked flawless, every caption confident. From the outside, she was thriving. Inside, she wasn't sure what she was feeling. Not sadness, not fear, just a growing sense that her life no longer belonged entirely to her. By the time Aliyah had been in Dubai for nearly 3 months, she no longer thought in weeks or schedules. Days simply folded into one another, each one wrapped in the same quiet luxury she had come to accept as normal. Her life was a sequence of spotless surfaces and polite voices, of people who always seemed to appear just before she needed them. She had stopped asking when the campaign would officially launch. Every delay came with a smooth explanation, and there was always another dinner, another photo shoot, another promise that things were moving forward. On a warm evening in late May, she stood on her balcony, watching the city's lights ripple against the sea. The skyline glittered like it had been drawn for her alone. Inside her suite, her suitcase sat open. For the first time in months, she was packing. She had told herself the trip had gone on long enough, that she needed a break. that Jacob deserved more than short calls and excuses. She missed the smell of her own sheets, the mess of home. She was tired of being watched by lenses, tired of the kind of silence that comes with perfection. Her flight was set for the next night. The booking had been handled by a new assistant, someone she hadn't met before. He had left the itinerary at the front desk, neatly printed, the return flight highlighted. For once it felt final. She even sent a message to her mother saying she would be home soon. The replies that came back were full of excitement and relief. That night, she attended what was meant to be her last formal dinner in Dubai. It was a quiet affair compared to the usual gatherings. No photographers, no press, just a handful of guests and the sheikh. He welcomed her warmly, congratulated her on what he called a beautiful journey. He told her she had represented the brand with pride and elegance, that she had a rare light. The dinner felt like a farewell, not an ending, but a pause before something new. He said he would be sad to see her go, but he understood that she missed home. His tone was soft, his smile kind. There was nothing in his voice that hinted at anything more. When she returned to her suite later that evening, the air felt unusually still. A bouquet of white roses waited on the table with a note that read, "Safe travels, Aaliyah. You have made us proud." The card wasn't signed, but she didn't need it to be. The next morning, the sky was cloudless, the kind of perfect day she had seen 100 times before. Breakfast arrived as usual, with coffee, pastries, and another folded card that simply said, "Good luck." She spent the morning walking along the terrace, scrolling through her phone, liking comments on her latest post, a photo of her in gold silk with the caption, "Gratitude in every chapter." It had already passed 200,000 likes. She felt content, calm, and ready to go home. But around noon, her plans began to shift. It started with a call from the concierge saying her driver would be late. Then a second call from her coordinator explaining that there had been a mix-up with her travel documents. She was told not to worry, that it would be fixed in a few hours. She wasn't alarmed. Delays were common, but she decided to double-check her itinerary. The printed ticket was still there, but when she tried to confirm it online, the booking number returned an error message. She refreshed the page, tried again, and saw the same result. Canceled. When she called the airline directly, the representative told her there was no active reservation under her name. She hung up, confused, then called her coordinator again. This time, no one answered. She sent an email, then a message through the contact app the brand used for scheduling. Both went unread. By evening, she was still in her room, dressed but uncertain. The air conditioning hummed quietly. Outside, the sunset turned the city gold. She tried to call Jacob, but the call didn't go through. The screen flashed a foreign message before cutting off. She tried again, and again. On the fourth try, it rang once, then went silent. She told herself not to panic. She reminded herself that this was Dubai, that everything was organized, that someone would sort it out. But for the first time since she had arrived, she felt a strange tightness in her chest. The confidence she had worn for months began to feel like a costume that no longer fit. A little after 9, there was a knock at her door. It wasn't room service. A hotel staff member stood there with a polite smile and told her a car was waiting downstairs. He said there had been a change to her travel arrangements and that she would be taken to meet a representative from the brand to finalize her documents. She hesitated, but the man's tone was calm, routine, and practiced. She grabbed her bag and followed. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. The lobby was quiet, the kind of quiet that lives between midnight and morning. Outside, a black car waited with tinted windows. The driver stepped out and opened the door. He didn't speak. She climbed in, still trying to convince herself that this was just a mistake, that she would be on her flight soon. The car pulled away from the hotel and merged into the city lights. She looked out at the towers she had once found beautiful. They no longer looked like symbols of success, just glass and silence reflecting back her own face. At 9:47 p.m., she opened her notes app and typed a single line. "If anything happens to me, tell Jacob I tried to leave." No one knows if she ever hit save. What is known is that her phone disconnected from the hotel network at 10:12 p.m. For the next hour, it moved across the city, the signal jumping between towers along the coast. Then, just before midnight, it went dark. A week later, fishermen along the shore found part of a young woman's body tangled in seaweed near the rocks. The tide had brought it in quietly, without witness. DNA confirmed what her family already feared. The official report described it as a drowning, an unfortunate accident in foreign waters. There were no further details, and no questions were welcomed. Back in Texas, Jacob refused to accept it. He knew her. He knew how careful she was, how strong she could swim, how afraid she had always been of the ocean at night. He waited for answers that never came, for calls that were never returned, for a truth that would make sense of something that never could. Aaliyah's story was over in the official records. But for those who loved her, it was just beginning. Quick pause here. I know you're probably deep into this story right now, wondering how it all unfolds. And I appreciate you being here for it. This channel is brand new, so your support, whether it's a like, a comment, or hitting subscribe, actually makes a huge difference. It helps me keep telling these stories. Okay, back to the story. To understand how a 23-year-old model ended up on the other side of the world chasing a promise that would never bring her home, we have to go back to where it all began. Long before the cameras and the followers, Aaliyah Carter's life was simple. She was born in the south side of Dallas, the second of 3 children in a family that worked hard and expected everyone else to do the same. Her mother, Lorraine, was a nurse who carried herself with strict pride. Her father, Robert, worked nights at a distribution plant. The Carters didn't have much, but they kept their heads high, and faith was the center of their house. Aaliyah was different from her siblings. She wasn't rebellious exactly, but she wanted something beyond the routine her parents lived. While her mother saved money for college and her father talked about real jobs, Aaliyah dreamed about lights, photo shoots, and people knowing her name. She spent hours watching YouTube makeup tutorials, copying poses from fashion magazines, and taking pictures with her cracked phone screen balanced on a pile of books. Her mother didn't understand it. Every argument between them circled back to the same thing. Lorraine wanted stability. Aaliyah wanted freedom. When she finished high school, she told her parents she wasn't enrolling in nursing school like they planned. She wanted to build a social media career. Her mother called it foolish. Her father stayed silent but disappointed. The tension turned into distance. When her older brother left for college and her younger sister started high school, Aaliyah began spending more time away from home. She picked up shifts at a small clothing store, modeling the outfits for their social pages in exchange for cash and exposure. It wasn't much, but people noticed. Comments turned into followers. Followers turned into opportunities. She started to believe she could make it. Then, just before her 21st birthday, she met Jacob. Jacob worked at an auto shop near her apartment. He was 3 years older, quiet but warm, the kind of man who said little but meant every word. Aaliyah met him when her old sedan broke down. He didn't charge her for the repair. Instead, he smiled and said she could pay him back by bringing him a coffee next time she passed by. She did, and the next time turned into another, and another. Jacob liked that she had big dreams, even if he didn't fully understand them. He was simple, steady, and patient, the opposite of everything chaotic in her world. He helped her move out when her fights with her mother became unbearable, offering her the spare room in his small apartment until she got on her feet. She never left. They built a life out of small things, late-night takeout, old movies, shared bills. Jacob was her first real supporter. When her followers hit 10,000, he took her out for dinner he couldn't afford. He believed in her when no one else did. But success online was slow, and real life was expensive. By the time she turned 22, her income came from small promotions and modeling gigs that barely covered rent. She still dreamed big, but every month seemed to tighten around her. That was when her old school friend Jasmine Reed reappeared. They had met years earlier in high school, two girls who used to talk about fame like it was something waiting for them. After graduation, they lost touch. Jasmine had always been ambitious, competitive, and quietly jealous of Aaliyah's looks. She wanted the same attention, but never quite managed to get it. So when she resurfaced online 2 years later, living a life of luxury, it caught Aaliyah off guard. Jasmine's page was filled with designer clothes, private jets, and expensive dinners. Her captions hinted at new partnerships and international collaborations. It looked too good to be true, but the images were real. Her following exploded overnight. People in their old circles started asking if she'd won the lottery. Aaliyah messaged her out of curiosity. They started talking again, first about harmless things, then about business. Jasmine was friendly, even generous. She told Aaliyah she'd been working with a new network of international brands that looked for models and influencers willing to travel for campaigns. She said it paid better than anything Aaliyah had ever seen. At first, Aaliyah thought Jasmine was exaggerating, but the proof was there. The photos, the gifts, the lifestyle. It was everything Aaliyah wanted. When she pressed for details, Jasmine said she could recommend her to the same network if Aaliyah was serious. She explained that everything was legitimate: contracts, travel documents, official communication. She said the brands were selective and valued discretion. It sounded professional, almost corporate. Aaliyah hesitated, but Jasmine's tone was convincing. She promised it was safe and that she would never risk her own reputation if it weren't. A few weeks later, Jasmine forwarded an email. It came from an international marketing address tied to what appeared to be a luxury automotive company based in Dubai. The message introduced a campaign looking for new faces for a global launch. The compensation was extraordinary, far beyond anything Aaliyah had ever been offered. The email mentioned a partnership with a well-known businessman, Sheikh Amir, who had a history of supporting creative talent. Aaliyah didn't know it then, but this email would change her entire life. At the time, it felt like the breakthrough she had been praying for. She printed the message, showed it to Jacob, and talked about what it could mean for their future. Jacob was cautious. He said to check everything twice, to make sure it was real. She promised she would. She asked Jasmine about her own experience, about what it was like working with the Sheikh's team. Jasmine spoke highly of them, describing professional meetings, generous hospitality, and how respectful everyone had been. She called the Sheikh a gentleman and said his reputation was spotless. That was all Aaliyah needed to hear. She replied to the email, attached her portfolio, and within days received a formal contract. Everything looked proper: logos, digital signatures, clauses about confidentiality and compensation. The flight and hotel were booked immediately after she accepted. She told Jacob she'd only be gone for a week. She told her mother she'd landed a global deal that would make her proud. Her mother didn't believe it, said it sounded like a trick. Aaliyah brushed off the warning, insisting it was legitimate. A few nights before leaving, she and Jacob went for a drive. He asked her if she was sure. She said yes. She said she could feel this was the start of something big. When she boarded that flight, she wasn't scared. She was excited. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about finally proving everyone wrong. And in her mind, there was no reason to doubt any of it. Her best friend had done it first and seemed perfectly fine. The call came early in the morning. Jacob had been asleep on the couch, his phone clutched in his hand, the television still tuned to the news station that had been running updates on Aaliyah's disappearance. When the ringtone broke the silence, he sat up too fast, hoping, just for a second, that it was her. It wasn't. The voice on the other end was flat. Official, rehearsed. The words felt heavy and distant, as if spoken through water. Remains identified. DNA confirmation, preliminary ruling, accidental drowning. Jacob didn't remember hanging up. The room just went quiet again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of his own breathing. He stared at the TV, at her last photo. Aaliyah in gold silk, smiling under the headline, "American Model Found Dead in Dubai." The picture didn't look real anymore. Within hours, the story spread across the internet. Blogs recycled the same facts, the same blurred photos, the same half-true summaries. Influencer found dead abroad. Tragic accident during luxury campaign. Each one ended the same way. Authorities investigating. No foul play suspected. Her family flew into confusion and grief. Her mother, who had doubted the trip from the beginning, refused to believe what she was hearing. She called every contact number on the embassy's list, leaving messages that were never returned. Her father spent days on the phone with officials who kept redirecting him to someone else. Every conversation ended with the same phrase: "We're doing everything we can." When the news broke, he didn't believe the reports, and he refused to sit back while officials treated her death like an accident. A few weeks later, he booked a flight to Dubai himself. He arrived with more determination than direction. No translator, no legal help, just his phone and a folder of screenshots from Aaliyah's last messages. He went to the hotel first, where staff brushed him off politely and told him the cameras in her hallway weren't working that night. He asked to see her belongings and was told they'd already been collected by the authorities. Frustrated and running out of options, Malik began contacting local reporters, desperate for anyone who would listen. Most ignored him. One didn't. That's how he met Layla Haddad, a journalist known for covering controversial cases involving Dubai's elite. When they finally spoke, her voice was steady but tired. She told him that Aaliyah's death wasn't the first. Other women, mostly foreign influencers, had come for similar brand collaborations linked to the same circle of wealthy sponsors. Some left quietly. Some vanished. Every case ended the same way: silence, compensation, and a closed file. Together, they began to trace what little they could. Jacob went through her social media drafts, screenshots saved to her cloud, fragments of emails still recoverable from the old laptop she used at home. What he found was ordinary on the surface: reminders for shoots, receipts, saved captions. But buried between them were signs of something she never had time to explain. Short notes, timestamps, photos taken inside rooms that didn't match her hotel, and a string of messages that stopped abruptly 2 days before she disappeared. Each discovery made the official report harder to believe. When Jacob shared what he'd found with the embassy, they thanked him for his cooperation and reminded him that the investigation abroad was closed. He realized then that the truth wasn't lost. It was being ignored. Layla wrote the first article under a pseudonym. She didn't use Aaliyah's name, only the initials, describing her as a young American influencer whose death raises questions about the powerful circles she entered. The piece spread fast online before disappearing within 24 hours. When Jacob asked why, Layla said she'd been contacted by legal representatives and told to remove it. She didn't say who they were, only that they spoke with authority. That night, Jacob posted his own version of the story on social media. He uploaded the photos, the itinerary, the fragments of evidence the embassy refused to acknowledge. The post went viral within hours. People demanded answers, tagging officials, tagging the brands, tagging the sheikh's name. The outrage grew quickly, louder than anyone expected. For the first time since Aaliyah's death, silence started to crack. Reporters began reaching out. Activists shared her story under the hashtag #ShareJusticeForSki-Aaliyah. Every day, more people joined in, connecting dots between similar cases that had been forgotten. But while the world argued online, Jacob sat alone in his small apartment, the suitcase still open on the table, her bracelet glinting under the kitchen light. The noise outside didn't bring him comfort. It only reminded him that the woman behind the headlines was gone and that the answers he wanted might never come. The longer Jacob stayed in Dubai, the clearer it became that finding answers would not depend on evidence, but on persistence. Each door he knocked on opened halfway and then quietly shut. The embassy had already marked the case as resolved. The police referred him to offices that didn't exist. When he asked to see the hotel's security footage, he was told that the cameras in Alia's hallway had been under maintenance that week. He walked the beach where she was found. The tide was low that morning, the air thick with salt and silence. He tried to imagine her final moments, but the picture refused to form. The report said she'd drowned, but there were no signs that she'd gone swimming, no record of her leaving the hotel alone, no witness who remembered seeing her near the water. The explanation was too neat, too complete, and that bothered him most. Layla met him there, a notebook in her hand. She moved carefully, glancing around before speaking. She told him that the beach had been searched before, several times, by the same patrols that later claimed to discover the remains. To her it felt staged, like a performance meant to close the story with finality. She had seen this pattern before. Every time a foreigner died under unclear circumstances, a report appeared within days. Accidental fall, heart failure, misadventure. There were always signatures at the bottom, always stamped in perfect alignment. The paper trail never faltered. Jacob asked how many others there were. Layla flipped through her notes. There were at least 4 names she could confirm. All young, all women, all visiting for influencer collaborations. Each one connected through the same public relations agency that no longer existed. When Jacob showed her Alia's contract, Layla studied it closely. The wording matched 2 other cases, identical phrasing, identical layout, identical expiration date. Only the names and the campaign titles were different. It was a pattern, not a coincidence. That night, Jacob returned to his hotel and read the contract over again. The company's name looked legitimate. Its logo, its address, even its registration number appeared authentic when searched online. But when he tried to call the office number listed, the line played a looped message in Arabic before disconnecting. He sent an email to the address on the document. It bounced back instantly. The next morning, he visited the building listed as the agency's headquarters. It was real, a polished tower in the business district, but the security guard at the desk had never heard of the company. The floor number printed on the contract didn't exist. He took photos of everything and sent them to Layla. She replied with one line. They were never meant to be found. Over the next few days, small things began to unsettle him. A car that seemed to linger outside his hotel at night. 2 men who followed him out of a cafe before abruptly turning away. Phone calls with no sound on the other end. He didn't know if it was paranoia or a warning, but he started taking the long route back to his room every evening. Layla advised him to leave Dubai and work from the U.S., but he refused. He said he couldn't leave her here. Not like this. She didn't argue. Instead, she focused on collecting information quietly. Through contacts in the press, she learned that the Sheikh's legal team had started sending letters to media outlets reminding them to avoid speculation. In a place where power and image carried more weight than truth, few dared to ignore such reminders. Still, small cracks began to show. A hotel staff member who had served Alia privately reached out to Layla under anonymity. The woman said she remembered the model clearly, friendly, polite, always tipping generously. She also recalled that Alia had tried to check out a day earlier than planned, but the system flagged her reservation as non-modifiable. No one was allowed to override it without clearance from an unnamed supervisor. That single detail changed everything. It meant Alia hadn't planned to stay longer. She'd tried to leave. Layla and Jacob followed that lead, tracing the staff records and digital logs until they found a timestamp of the attempted checkout. 10:32 a.m., the day before her disappearance. The record showed access denied. Minutes later, her profile was locked by management override. They presented this to the authorities. The officer they met glanced at the printout once before sliding it back across the table. "This information is confidential," he said, then added, "Please do not interfere with an ongoing investigation." Jacob asked what investigation. The man didn't answer. By the end of that week, Layla's name stopped appearing in the local press. Her editor removed her column, and her articles vanished from the paper's online archive. She called Jacob one evening and told him that her work permit had suddenly been under review. She sounded calm, but he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. When he offered to pay for her ticket out of the country, she refused. "If I leave," she said, "the story dies." The next morning, she sent him a folder of encrypted files, copies of documents she'd collected over the years. "If anything happens to me," her message read, "make sure these get out." That line stuck with him. It was the same one Aliyah had typed on her phone before vanishing. For the first time, Jacob began to believe that whatever had happened to her wasn't just tragedy or coincidence. It was part of something larger, something designed to stay invisible. The more he searched, the more he realized how invisible she had already become. Her online profiles were still up, still gaining followers, still full of comments from people who didn't know she was gone. The algorithm kept her alive, resharing her smile across thousands of screens. In a way, she was still moving, forever trapped between the life she built and the truth she never got to tell. And in the silence that followed, Jacob decided that if no one else would tell that truth, he would. Jacob didn't know where to start, so he started small. He bought a cheap notebook from a corner shop and began writing everything down: the times, the places, the names, even the emotions that came with them. He wasn't an investigator, but he had something no one else did: time and reason. The world could move on. He couldn't. He stayed in Dubai longer than anyone thought he would. His savings disappeared fast. Some nights he slept in budget hotels, other times in the airport lounge, anywhere that didn't feel like her old suite. Each morning he retraced her steps: the hotel lobby, the streets around it, the marina, the restaurant she had posted from. He carried her photo in his hand, asking if anyone remembered her. Most people said no. A few hesitated, looked around, and whispered yes before walking away. Layla kept feeding him whatever she could find. Every lead, every scrap of paper, every screenshot. Most of it went nowhere, but one file, one that she had hidden under a fake name, finally gave them something. It was an internal memo from a travel agency used by the Sheikh's Foundation. The document mentioned influencer travel arrangements tied to promotional contracts. At the bottom of the memo was a list of initials. 3 of them matched the names in Layla's old cases. The same file showed invoices for appearance fees wired to offshore accounts. When she cross-checked the routing numbers, they all led to the same financial hub in Bahrain. The amounts were enormous. The payments weren't for modeling. They were buyouts, money paid after incidents to silence complaints. The pattern was almost perfect: contact, contract, disappearance, settlement, silence. Jacob felt sick reading it. Every number on that page was someone's story, just like hers. They planned to go public, but they knew that once they did, the window would close. Layla contacted 2 foreign correspondents she trusted, both working for European outlets, less likely to fold under pressure. She told Jacob to stay hidden, to leave the country for a few weeks while she assembled everything. He didn't listen. He wanted to confront the people who had lied to him, to look one of them in the eye and ask how they could erase a life so easily. He went back to the hotel where Aliyah had stayed, pretending to be a relative collecting leftover paperwork. The front desk handed him an envelope. Inside were photocopies of her registration forms and an unsigned waiver written in Arabic and English. One line caught his eye. Guest consents to extended stay as required by host agency. The date beside the signature was from 2 days after her scheduled return flight. The handwriting looked like hers, but thinner, shakier. He took a photo of it and sent it to Layla. She told him not to go back. 2 days later, when he called her number, it was disconnected. Her email stopped working. The encrypted files she had shared were still there, but her name was gone from every online record of the magazine she'd worked for. He reached out to her colleagues. None responded. One finally replied with a single line. "She's gone quiet. Don't look for her." The silence that followed was heavier than grief. Jacob understood now what she meant by, "if anything happens to me." He uploaded the documents she'd given him to an anonymous server. Then he wrote a long post on Aaliyah's page. He included screenshots, travel records, pieces of contracts, and Layla's memo. He tagged the embassy, the airline, the Sheikh's business foundation. The post went viral within hours. People around the world began to dig. Internet users matched company names, compared old photos, and found more women who had vanished under the same vague, promotional trips. It became a wave, an uncoordinated, furious demand for the truth. International reporters reached out, asking for interviews. Jacob refused them all. He wasn't chasing fame, he just wanted the record to exist. If they erased her in Dubai, they couldn't erase her everywhere else. Within a week, the Sheikh's lawyers released a statement denying any connection to these baseless rumors. They called the documents fabrications and threatened legal action against anyone who shared them. But the story had already spread too far. Major outlets picked it up. The embassy released a new statement promising to review all recent cases involving U.S. citizens abroad. It sounded official, but Jacob knew it meant nothing. Late one night, an anonymous account messaged him on social media. It contained a single video file, grainy security footage from what looked like a hotel hallway. The timestamp matched the night Aaliyah disappeared. The footage showed her walking quickly toward the elevator, wearing a light coat, her phone in hand. A man followed a few seconds later. His face was partially hidden, but his build was familiar. The clip ended before the elevator doors closed. Jacob sent it to journalists. Within hours, the file disappeared from the web. Accounts that shared it were suspended for privacy violations. But the image of that hallway stayed burned into his mind. The way she turned her head, as if sensing someone behind her, the tension in her shoulders, the fear that seemed to hang in the air. Layla's files, the memo, the footage, all of it formed a shape that no one wanted to name aloud. Power, money, silence. Jacob realized that the truth wouldn't come from the people in charge. It would have to come from the ones who refused to forget. And so, while officials denied and journalists hesitated, he did the only thing left to do. He kept telling her story. He uploaded every detail, every timeline, every unanswered question. He built a thread so long it was impossible to ignore. By the end of the month, millions had read it. Aaliyah's face was everywhere again, not as an influencer, not as a model, but as a question no one could bury anymore. Weeks passed, and what had started as grief had turned into a kind of mission that Jacob could no longer stop. He wasn't sleeping much. He ate when he remembered to, spent the rest of his time combing through the fragments she'd left behind. Her phone was locked, but her cloud account wasn't. That became his focus. He downloaded everything: messages, photos, notes, voice memos, even drafts of posts she never published. It felt invasive, but it was the only way he could still hear her voice. Most of it was ordinary. Photos of food, notes about lighting angles, screenshots of flights, hashtags, captions she'd been proud of. But as he went further back in time, the tone shifted. There were folders named simply D and Work. Inside them were receipts from restaurants, car services, and unfamiliar phone numbers saved only as initials. There were deleted videos, fragments of conversations, and short recordings that cut off mid-sentence. One file stopped him cold, a 12-second voice note, time-stamped 2 nights before her disappearance. The audio was faint, but the fear in her tone was unmistakable. Aaliyah's voice said something about wanting to leave early, followed by a man's voice, low and calm, asking her why she was rushing. There was the sound of a chair scraping, a sharp breath, and then the recording ended. He played it over and over until he could memorize every sound. When he sent the clip to Layla's old contact in Europe, the journalist confirmed what he already suspected. The voice matched a public recording of the Sheikh speaking at an event years earlier. That small piece of proof changed everything. The audio wasn't clear enough for a courtroom, but it was undeniable enough for the world. He released it online under the title, The Last Conversation. Within hours, it spread across platforms, reaching millions. The reaction was instant. Some called it fake, others called it haunting. A few refused to believe it entirely, but many recognized what it represented, a voice that had been taken away, finally speaking again. After that, people began sending him more files, old employees, former assistants, anonymous sources. They all shared fragments, travel manifests, deleted invoices, internal messages about VIP clients. Each document painted the same story in sharper lines. It was a machine, a system that dressed exploitation as opportunity. The names changed, but the structure stayed the same. As the noise grew, so did the resistance. Jacob's posts were flagged, his account suspended, his email filled with warnings written in legal language. Someone broke into his apartment while he was out. Nothing was stolen, but his laptop had been moved. He started keeping copies of everything offline, hidden in places he hoped no one would think to look. In the middle of all of it, an unexpected message arrived. It came from an address that looked random, with no name attached. The subject line simply read, "She tried to fight." Attached was a single photograph. Aaliyah standing in a dim hallway, facing the camera. She looked calm, almost at peace, but her eyes told another story. Tired, resigned, as if she already knew what was coming. In the corner of the image, a blurred figure appeared behind her. He couldn't prove where it came from or when it was taken, but he knew it was real. It was the same hallway from the security footage. He stared at it for a long time, then added it to the thread online. He didn't caption it. He didn't need to. For the first time, major news outlets began treating the case seriously. The audio clip, the documents, the photograph. It was enough to break through the silence. International reporters reached out to the Sheikh's representatives for comment. They denied everything. The official investigation in Dubai remained closed, but foreign agencies started their own inquiries. 1 month later, Jacob received a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Inside was a small flash drive and a keychain engraved with the word Carter. The drive contained backup data recovered from Aaliyah's phone, the full version of the audio files he had posted before. The final recording was longer than he expected. It started with her breathing, steady but nervous. Then came the man's voice again, asking her to sit down. He sounded patient, like someone explaining something simple. She said she wanted to leave. He said she should rest. There was a pause, then a sharp noise. A door opening, footsteps, her voice rising just enough to say, "Please don't." The clip ended there. He didn't upload that one. Some things didn't need to be heard to be believed. Instead, he wrote a new post. He didn't talk about evidence or corruption or guilt. He wrote about who she was, her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she believed she could change her life through sheer will. He reminded people that the story they were following wasn't about scandal, but about a woman who had trusted the wrong world. The post went viral again, but this time for a different reason. It wasn't anger that carried it. It was empathy. Strangers left comments calling her brave, kind, unforgettable. People began sharing their own stories. Times they'd ignored red flags, times they'd been promised something too good to be true. The louder the story grew, the more determined someone became to bury it. It started quietly. Jacob's posts began disappearing without warning. The platform cited copyright concerns and privacy violations, though he had used his own photos and recordings. When he appealed, the rejections came instantly, worded like they'd been written by a machine. Then came the emails. At first, polite, requests from a law firm representing the Sheikh's business network. They thanked him for his passion, but urged him to remove inaccurate materials that could mislead the public. A week later, the tone shifted. The words defamation and legal consequences appeared in bold. He ignored them. 2 days later, his accounts were hacked. Posts were replaced with empty captions or photos of sunsets. It looked random, but it wasn't. The stories that carried evidence vanished first. The ones about her life stayed untouched, as if someone wanted to rewrite her back into something harmless. The press followed suit. Articles that once linked her death to corruption were quietly edited. The paragraphs about the Sheikh's foundation disappeared, replaced with neutral language, unverified claims, speculation, ongoing review. Entire comment sections vanished overnight. Even the journalists who had reached out began to go silent. Layla's old editor was one of them. When Jacob finally reached him, the man spoke in short sentences, his voice tight. He said there were international interests involved and that continuing coverage would compromise regional stability. Jacob realized then that the cover-up wasn't rumor. It was active, coordinated, and powerful. He decided to take the evidence offline. He printed everything: contracts, emails, bank statements, screenshots, even Aaliyah's old voice notes transcribed by hand. He sealed them in a thick folder labeled Truth. If they erased the digital trail, the paper would survive. But erasing wasn't enough for those trying to silence him. One night, while driving home, a black SUV trailed him for several blocks before turning off without headlights. Another time, a man in a suit approached him outside his hotel, smiling too easily, warning him that he was involved in something bigger than he realized. Jacob didn't respond. He'd stopped feeling fear the moment he lost her. Back home in Texas, things weren't safer. He noticed the same number calling him late at night, the same car parked near his apartment. Friends started to worry. Some asked him to let it go, others avoided him altogether. To them, it had become an obsession. But to Jacob, it was purpose, the only one left. Meanwhile, the Sheikh's Foundation launched a campaign to clean its image. Lavish charity events, public donations, magazine covers, all painting him as a philanthropist misunderstood by Western media. He gave interviews about digital misinformation and cancel culture. Every quote was polished, every appearance deliberate. The world moved on because it was easier to believe a lie wrapped in luxury than a truth soaked in grief. For months, Jacob fought shadows. His posts reached fewer people. His page was buried under new trends, new controversies. The algorithms that once spread his message now ignored him. But even if his audience shrank, he refused to stop. He uploaded one final file, a scanned copy of the contract with her forged signature, the one authorizing her extended stay. That file was shared thousands of times before it vanished too. Then something unexpected happened. An investigative journalist from London contacted him privately. She'd been following the story, verifying the documents, tracing the money. Her outlet had enough international protection to publish without fear. She promised to tell it exactly as it was, with every name intact. When the expose finally went live, it detonated across every major network. It detailed years of hidden payments, fake agencies, and the quiet removal of witnesses. It showed how every thread led back to the same offices, the same signatures, the same man who had smiled through interviews while denying everything. Public outrage returned stronger than before. Governments reopened inquiries. Activists demanded diplomatic accountability. The Sheikh's businesses started losing contracts abroad. For the first time, someone with real power was cornered by truth. But power rarely breaks cleanly. His lawyers struck back with lawsuits. They framed the evidence as fabricated, Jacob as unstable, the journalist as politically motivated. They flooded the internet with bots, fake articles, and counterclaims until no one could tell what was real anymore. The truth and the lie blurred together, and the world, as it always does, moved on to the next headline. The pressure didn't fade this time. The files, the recordings, and the endless public outrage forced the case open in a place where money usually erased everything. His foundation's accounts were frozen, travel restricted, and people who had once worked for him began to talk. What had looked like a spotless empire now looked like a network built to hide crimes. When the arrest finally happened, it was quiet and deliberate. Cameras caught him stepping out of a black SUV, still in a tailored suit. Expression calm, as though he believed none of this could touch him. He had lived his entire life convinced of that. Months of hearings followed, and for the first time his record came into full view. The charges went far beyond Aliyah. Investigators uncovered years of similar cases buried under payouts and falsified reports. Women had been flown in for projects, isolated and intimidated into silence. Some left alive, some didn't. His influence had kept every accusation off paper, until now. When it became clear that the evidence couldn't be buried, he agreed to a plea deal, a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. He thought it would make him look cooperative. Instead, it stripped him bare. He started from the beginning. He admitted that he first learned about Aliyah through Jasmine Reed, her old school friend who had suddenly started living rich. Jasmine had been a recruiter. She sent his team photos, follower counts, and notes on potential candidates. She described Aliyah as beautiful, disciplined, and eager for opportunity. For that, she was paid what they called a finder's commission. He said Aliyah caught his attention immediately. She stood out because she didn't play the game. She was polite but firm. She didn't flirt, didn't beg, didn't chase favors. That irritated him. He wasn't used to being ignored. He told the court, "I wanted her respect, and when I couldn't earn it, I wanted control." He admitted that he had a history of violence and that for years no one had dared to stop him. His temper was legendary within his circle. Staff knew that if he wanted someone, that person was delivered, and if someone refused him, they disappeared. He said his obsession with Aliyah grew the longer she stayed. She kept mentioning Jacob, her boyfriend back home, and it ate at him. To him, she wasn't a woman anymore. She was a challenge he had to win. When she kept saying no, his ego turned that rejection into rage. The night he attacked her wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. He wanted to punish her for denying him. He wanted to prove that her boundaries meant nothing. When she tried to leave the next morning, still shaken but determined, he called his security team and told them to take care of it. Those were his exact words. He didn't mean to comfort her or calm her. He meant to end the problem. His men found her near the service corridor by the elevators. They escorted her out of sight of the main cameras. He didn't follow. He simply waited in his suite until someone confirmed it was done. Later that night, her phone signal vanished. By morning, he had already approved a fabricated report calling it an accidental drowning. He wasn't panicked. He was proud. Aliyah had bruised his pride, and in his mind, removing her restored his control. When the prosecutor asked if he understood what that meant, he said only, "She embarrassed me. I fixed it." The courtroom was silent. The arrogance was chilling. He went on to describe how the cleanup was handled. Hotel records altered, security footage erased, staff paid off, a staged discovery arranged near the shoreline days later. He described the entire process like a business operation, emotionless and precise. He had done this before. He named the men who carried out his orders. He named the officers who approved the false report. He named the companies that laundered money for silence. And finally, he named Jasmine. She was arrested for conspiracy and fraud, accepting a plea deal for reduced time in exchange for evidence. When he finished, the judge called it the most calculated abuse of wealth and power this court has ever recorded. The Sheikh was originally facing a life sentence, but after striking a plea deal and providing a full confession, the court reduced his punishment to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. It wasn't justice in full, but it was the first real consequence he had ever faced. A powerful man finally caged by his own truth. Several of his aides were convicted alongside him. His foundation was dissolved, his accounts frozen, and what remained of his fortune was seized by the state. Outside the courthouse, Jacob stood among a crowd of reporters. He didn't speak until the verdict was read. When they asked if he was satisfied, he said quietly, "I'm not looking for satisfaction. I just wanted her story to be told the way it happened." Aaliyah's body was finally brought home. Her mother placed a white rose on the casket. Her father whispered a prayer. Jacob stayed until the light began to fade, tracing her name with his hand. The confession didn't undo what happened, but it made one thing permanent. Aaliyah Carter was no longer just a headline. She was a truth no amount of money could bury again. Before her name became a headline, before Dubai, before all the noise that followed, Aaliyah Carter was just a 23-year-old woman who believed she could change her life. She wasn't chasing fame for greed. She wanted freedom, recognition, a chance to prove she could be more than what people expected of her. She believed that hard work and hope were enough. That belief took her halfway across the world. It brought her face to face with a man who saw people as things to own, someone who mistook attention for affection and power for love. When she said no, he took everything from her, thinking the world would never know the difference. But the world did find out. And if there's one thing her story reminds us, it's that evil doesn't always come with a weapon in its hand. Sometimes it comes with an offer, a promise, and a smile that looks too good to be true. If you found this story as gripping as we did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. We share real stories that expose power, deceit, and the darkest sides of human nature. Cases the world tried to forget, but we refuse to let fade away. Thank you for watching.